Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming for the service of remembrance and celebration of lives of our residents who died since February. As you can see, there are a lot of us, and I trust that this will be a meaningful time for all of us, as well as time to remember and celebrate. It's a warm day, so here is the door open to the water supplies and coffee if anyone wants and needs to grab during the service. You're welcome. They're adjusting the temperature as well, so I think we'll be okay. My name is Guta. I'm a chaplain here at Capitol Lakes, and I want to welcome you all to this service. As welcoming words and words of gathering, I chose a poem by E. Cummings, I Carry Your Heart. I carry your heart with me. I carried it in my heart. I am never without it. Anywhere I go, you go, my dear. And whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling. I fear no fate, for you are my fate, my sweet. I want no world, for beautiful you are, my world, my true. And it's you are whatever a moon has always meant, and whenever a sun will always shine in you, is you. Here is the deepest secret nobody knows. Here is the root of the root, and the bud of the bud, and the sky of a tree called life, which grows higher than the soul can hope or mind can hide. And this is the wonder that is keeping the stars apart. We'll continue with hearing the sacred scripture by Gail. Hold this, sir.
This is Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. It's found in the New Testament, the book of Matthew, the 5th chapter. Now, when he saw the crowds, he went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them by saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. Amen.
I don't know if those who die live on in spirit, nor whether we will ever meet again, but I believe in immortality. As long as our lost loved ones are remembered, they live on, immortal in memory, yet more than memory. Each life has impacts on so many others who in turn pass on that influence. Think of the impact of infants on their families, and of children on their playmates, and of adolescents on their first love, and how an adult's influence and contributions to family, friends, students, communities, and workplaces spread to others. My father's honesty lives on, my mother's thrift, my best friend's love of sports, my sister's poetry, none rich or famous, all immortal, part of others and of me. Each life we celebrate today left so many marks upon the world will never be the same. Because they dropped their pebbles into the great pond of life, and still their circles spread and touch others who touch others, and so they live forever. This is the poem that ends it. They have sailed away from us on that voyage we all will take. They have gone on ahead and perhaps await our coming in our time, in time, sometime, or perhaps not. Perhaps they're still with us in memory faces, memory voices, in who we have become. Nobody who was loved will ever stop being.
Bonjour. O Great Spirit, we are gathered here today to speak of our brothers and our sisters at Capitol Lakes who have walked on before us into the spirit world. O Great Spirit, we ask that you give them peace. We thank you for their lives. They became a part of our lives here in our home at Capitol Lakes. Great Spirit, we feel your presence. We feel your holy breath upon our heads and upon our faces. We ask for your blessing for all here present and for those whom they represent. We ask that you give guidance to those who attend to the needs of this community today and well into all our tomorrows. We thank you, Great Spirit, for the remembrance of those dear friends whose life was shared with us here at Capitol Lakes. They are now in the spirit world, but we do feel their spirit within us. Chi, Miigwech.
The persons we are remembering and honoring today were our neighbors, our friends, our dearly family members. They were givers of sources of love and nurture, guidance, wisdom, and happiness. The light and warmth of their presence enriched our lives. We find great comfort knowing that as we remember them, they continue to give us those gifts and blessings. As I read the name of each person we are remembering today, we invite you, as you choose, to share with us a characteristic or a special memory of that person who was dear to you. The sharing of these memories brings gratitude for yesterday, strength for today, and hope for tomorrow. We will remember today Nancy Freihand. Nancy was a resident at Health Center. She got to our community about a couple of years ago as her chaplain. I happen to know she grew up as an Episcopalian. And what I remember about Nancy was that she had this loving and caring relationship with her caring husband, who would come every day for dinner. They would spend time together and had a wonderful relationship to her last day. So we remember Nancy. Elizabeth Adams. Greg. I'll bring you a microphone. So.
Elizabeth Adams was my mother-in-law. My name is Gary Leisman. She lived here in the Heights for about 5 years and almost 6 years after a hip fracture in the assisted living. One thing that she is well known for here at Capitol Lakes is the sing-along. And she has been remembered with this booklet called Singing Along with Liz. So in Liz's honor, I would ask that we sing one verse of On Wisconsin. On Wisconsin, on Wisconsin, plunge right through that line. Run the ball clear down the field, a touchdown sure this time. On Wisconsin, fight on for her fame. Fight, fellows, fight, 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 we'll win this game.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Paul.
Along with that singing, Liz would come to the social down in Terraces. And very memorably, because she was so proud of that singing ability, she would get up, stand before the group. Sometimes she would direct a song, but what she liked best was to sing the Marseillaise. And she would sing it through twice, marching along, all in French. Just a beautiful job and so memorable.
And I will always remember Liz with God Bless America.
Test.
Anyone else? No? Alice Kronsky, a Heights resident.
Alice was my former mother-in-law. And just to give you a sense of how big a heart she had enough love for me and my family, my son and my husband, and, of course, loved her son, Ward, and his wife, Naomi, and her grandchildren. And so her heart was so big, and I was so happy when she moved to Madison. And I knew she was having dinner often with my mother, Sylvia, and sometimes with my son, Luke, and his girlfriend. And that was very special. And she often came over for dinner, too. So that was great.
What comes to my mind about Alice, that she had great heart but great mind too. Natasha, our resident services director, often talks how Alice was really computer savvy, and she knew all those things about email and web and Wi-Fi and the things that we're still learning, and she was really great with that. So. We'll next remember Margaret Peggy Lawrence, health center resident. Yeah, Tom.
Peggy Lawrence was a friend of mine and lived here too briefly for really anybody at the staff to get to know her. Was born in Madison, had family from Stoughton in the area, graduated from Madison West. Her dad was an engineer who went on to become a vice president at Madison Gas and Electric, and Peggy followed his vocation, becoming an engineer here from the university. Got a job with Boeing, worked there her entire working life, worked on the space station, was a project manager. He used to tell me, if it's not Boeing, I'm not going, which apparently was one of their mottos. So Peggy lived around the country. Boeing was out in Seattle, and they had branches in various spots. So at one point she lived down in Texas near the space station, and went to California, out by Seal Beach. And then when she retired, she came back here, took care of her mom, who passed a year later, and then her dad passed around last Thanksgiving, and then her cat passed about the same time, and Peggy kind of went into a tailspin there, and was in the hospital for about a month, and then came here and was received a lot of excellent care. And she was a person that suffered no fools and was very demanding about how things should go, but she was a good friend, loyal friend, and we'll all miss her. And I see her stepsister is here. Did you want to say something?
Hi, I'm Alexis Turner, Peggy's stepsister. Her dad and my mom married over 33 years ago. He died last November, actually the same day. I called her after he died, and she was putting her cat down that she had brought from California, and one day the cat surprised everybody by launching onto the window screen about 5 feet up in the air because there was a bird on the other side. Peggy also loved Halloween. She had a condo over on West Mifflin, 300 block of West Mifflin, and I never quite saw her decorations, but I know at one point she had quite an extensive collection, and she had something like that would fly out a bit, but I think it got encouraged not to do that. Like Ted said, Peggy, very intelligent, but she did have her foibles, and unfortunately alcohol was one of them. But in any case, she did come back. She visited her dad, and when the woman who cooked for my mom and him was ill, she brought food, and she brought this delicious shepherd's pie and It wasn't until months later I'm like, darn it, I never got the recipe. But she, like Ted said, she never suffered fools, and she joined us on Halloween. Love that holiday. Miss her greatly. I go by her place at least twice every day when I work, and I've had to kind of disconnect from, looking up to see if Peggy's up out on the balcony. And she loved birds, and she loved her cat, and she had this great moose above her gas fireplace that she would decorate, and she would send pictures. And she also had these interesting ringtones where it would be like, "Bah," or something like that, to kind of like, okay, somebody's calling me that I'm not sure I want to talk to. I miss her greatly. Thank you.
We will remember, and we are remembering Peggy. Next, we'll remember Judy Murray, a Terraces resident.
Wasn't prepared for this. I'm Marge Murray, and I'm Judy's daughter. Judy was in the Terraces for the last couple of years of her life as her health and her mind started to fail her. I'm trying to remember Mom before she came here. It's a woman that went back and got her PhD in her late 40s, nursing professor, became an intrepid traveler. Pictures of her riding an elephant in Thailand, and some of the stories that if she'd been my kid doing those travels, I'd be like, oh my God, don't tell me you did that. But she did it. She loved to read. She loved her grandkids. Just missed my youngest graduating in May. Anyway, that's about it. I miss her. Thanks for everybody that took care of her while she was here and friended her. Tilly, I see you there. That's...
How I remember Judy, it was that photo that we posted on our Facebook page when there was a women's march in front of Capitol last winter. She and Sally were there together, still fighting for the women's rights. Yeah. So we remember Judy. Judith Kaufman, Health Center resident.
Judy was what can be described as a presence. She made her presence known through her beautiful voice, her singing, her formation of choirs, her interaction with cultures of all different kinds, her continual quest for learning and then for sharing it through teaching. After the year she spent in Holland with her loving husband, she discovered a Yiddish choir there, and she brought it back to the idea back to Madison, and I believe the Yiddish choir has performed here several times, as well as many other places, but that's just part of Judy's voice. The main part of Judy's voice was her ability to raise it against evil. She never suffered the sin of silence. She remembered, as my dear friend Ada Deer used to say, to speak loudly even if your knees are trembling. And Judy was able to do this. So we will remember her as a presence, as a voice, as a person who cared for people whom she felt were downtrodden, as a feminist, and very briefly, as a presence here. She appreciated the care she got and felt the love of all.
We will remember, and we are remembering Judith. Next, Health Center resident Jafar Khalaf al-Abdullah. Jafar came to Capitol Lakes for rehab. Was on second floor of health center. Actually, I never had a chance to meet him personally because he died shortly after coming here, but met his wife and his son, who were surprised by this sudden death. And what I read from the obituaries, Jafar was active on faculty of UW and lived for a few decades in Madison, and was beloved husband and father in their family. So we remember Jafar. Well, next we'll remember Janet Orvilo, a health center resident.
Thanks. Janet was my mother. I'm Leilani. She was a wild child, free spirit, bohemian type of single mother who raised my brother and I with a lot of sarcasm. That's where we got it all from. She moved back to Madison. I was here. I had my first son. She moved here when he was born in around 2009. And around 2013, she started having a series of strokes. In 2015, ended up here with the great care of Capitol Lakes. She couldn't speak and she couldn't move herself around, but she didn't have receptive aphasia. So she understood everything, and I think those who cared for her knew that they got her message. You know, she was always able to communicate her thoughts with them, and so always appreciative of Capitol Lakes and everything they do here. And I miss my mom, of course.
Janet was also a faithful attendant of all services and always sitting in the first row, and it was fun to have her and remember her. Was there anyone else that want to say? Okay, yeah. We remember Janet. Evelyn Butner, health center resident. Oh, yes, Sally.
Capitol Lakes is a small world. When Jim and I moved into Capitol Lakes, I went to visit my Aunt Evelyn, who lived in Madison her whole married life. And while I was there, I told her that we were living in Capitol Lakes, and because she and a cousin were good friends, but had forgotten each other's addresses, I sent her a postal card of Capitol Lakes with a little X by our window, and on the card, I gave her the cousin's mailing address so that that would be something that she wouldn't lose or misplace. A couple of days later, I got a call from a young woman who works at Capitol Lakes who said, "I'm your cousin." I said, "You are?" Her name is Ellie Bittner. Some of you may know her. She works in the social programs in the health center. So we have become new friends. She was the baby of the family, so I never knew her very well. But what a small world that her mother connected the two of us through Capitol Lakes.
I have a note from Allie, daughter of Evelyn. So Ellie wanted you to know that Ellie's father, Evelyn's husband, passed away in 1997 on October 10th. And he and Evelyn are together again, as Ellie said, for tomorrow on July 7th will be their 74th anniversary. So that's how Ellie wants to remember her mom and her dad. So we remember Evelyn. Arnita Reedy. So, health center resident. Yeah.
I'd like to speak to Arnita. When I came to Capitol Lakes, I had the apartment on the same floor as Arnita, and she couldn't have extended herself more. Her daughter had a farm, apple farm or something in the east, and she would bring me apples, and she'd come and tell me about them. She was the sweetest, nicest lady, and I've only met her for a short time.
Yeah, this is a different one. Yeah, so that one lived assisted living, so this one is just yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice story. Yeah, Arnita actually lived in Poinet, and what I remember about her is her neighbor and the best friend who would be a regular visitor and support for her. And Arnita came for rehab like several of others, our residents that we are remembering today, and her health issues became more complex. And she was with hospice, and then at the time when she was transitioning to hospice, I remember visiting with her and how she was very accepting of what's coming up, and a very a social worker in our community is calling very realistic her attitude. I remember that at some point she had difficulties with how she felt and was seeking for extra comfort, and our staff sent me to visit with her, and she was unresponsive for a while, and then when I asked, what can I do for you? And she said, well, she kind of woke up from her stage that she was in, and said, well, why don't we say a prayer? And it was a very moving moment. We said the prayer, and then she went back to her also kind of a dream or state that she was in before. So I remember Arnita. Next will be, we are remembering Leonard Small, Heights resident. Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve Small. I'm Lenny Small's son. My parents moved here in 2010 from California. If you knew my dad, he was quick to reassure you that he wasn't crazy for trading in the California weather for the Wisconsin weather. But once he was here, he was really grateful to have been here, to come here. Being closer to his grandchildren and his children really made it worthwhile. Although he also was reassured when one of the local theaters started playing the Saturday live Met broadcast. That was another requirement for him to come here. And if you know my dad, he loved opera. He said that he wanted to live long enough, and in fact, he wrote this in one of his stories. My dad, after he retired, wrote it quite a bit, that he wanted to witness the wedding of his oldest granddaughter. And I think he felt very blessed to not only have witnessed the wedding of his oldest granddaughter, but his other granddaughter as well, and the birth of his first great-grandchild, Briella, who was born 2 years ago, who gave my father a special joy. And in the last few weeks of his life, I think it was the real light that gave him incredible pleasure. My dad, when I think about him, he was an optimist. tended to see the best in people, expected that things would usually work out in the end. I don't remember him, he tended to forget things, bad things that happened. I don't remember him ever holding a grudge. He tended to delight in the moment and rarely fretted about the past. I think of my dad as a kind of guy who would like buy a raffle ticket and enjoy thinking about what would happen when he won. And then, of course, he never would win, but quickly let that go and enjoyed the fact that he had some pleasure thinking about the fact that he almost won, right? Although my dad could not play an instrument, he couldn't sing a tune, he really very much loved music. And for folks who are here probably know that about my dad. And he had a lifelong love of musicals and opera in particular, and classical music. And after retirement, he lectured quite a bit, especially in Southern California, a little bit when he came to Madison. I think he wanted to sort of share his insights and the things about music that gave him pleasure. He wanted other people to see that as well. And as I mentioned, after my dad retired, he also became a writer. The focus of a lot of his work was about his own life, about his mother, Goldie, who was, he really adored and was a character herself, a lot like my father, I think. He wrote short stories for some local magazines. I think he published some things in your literary newsletter. I think my dad actually got a couple of checks for writing stories, his first one when he was in his late 70s. So that's when he really became a paid published writer. Anyway, I just want to end by saying that some of you probably were here for 2 years ago. We were fortunate to celebrate my dad's 90th birthday, and we held an opera concert celebration at Capitol Lakes. I know it gave my dad really great pleasure to celebrate with everybody and to experience an opera performance that was created in his honor. I think I remember him. You're always your father's child. I think the other thing that amazed him was that I was able to plan it. That he kept thinking of me still as 9 years old and getting into trouble. In any case, we are really saddened of my dad's passing, but we're really grateful to have been touched by his presence in our lives.
Well, thank you, Steve. Yeah.
You mentioned his stories. It was the center post that they were printed in here. And I just loved, especially the stories about his mother. She really was a character. I always looked forward to it. I also, I don't know if I should mention this or not, but went through the throes of, he watched me as I, went around in my wheelchair. And he finally decided he needed one. And so he came to me, for advice and so forth. And subsequently, he really learned how to use it. But in the beginning, it was not good to be too close to him. And Judy knows that only too well because he would ride over her foot. And for me, he would bang right into the back of my wheelchair. And I was always glad it was the back and not the front. So that just kind of made me laugh. But he did. He finally, to his credit, he learned how to manage it, and handle it. But I really enjoyed dinners with him and so forth because he was just, interesting and fun to be with.
It was my joy to meet Leonard first at the Shabbat, the Jewish Sabbath gatherings that we had. And I remember when I was working for Jewish Social Services, being introduced to him. And as somebody whose maiden name was Smith, I'm very aware of how people's names got changed at Ellis Island or elsewhere from complex European names. So I said, "Oh, Mr. Small." And this is how his gentle sense of humor always touched me. He said, "Oh, Mr. Small, was your name Klein in the old country?" Knowing that Klein, of course, means small in German and Yiddish. And he loved that, and you could just see the twinkles in his eyes lighting up. And he told me with delight, "No, it was Smolovich." And so I will always remember what his name was in the old country. I will always remember the twinkles in his eyes. And I didn't know he couldn't sing, but because he joined in the Sabbath songs with gusto. I suppose we're fortunate other people drowned him out, but it was very lovely.
We remember Leonard. Beth Teray, Health Center resident. Beth came from hospice actually to us. She was 54 years old when she died. I met her daughter and aunt Pat, who was like mother to her. Beth was not able to communicate verbally with us, but with her eyes, she was very expressive and able to connect with people around her. And we remember Beth. Next, we'll remember Grace Lund, Health Center resident. Okay.
Hi, I'm a niece of my Aunt Grace, and Aunt Grace came from Minnesota 10 years ago, and so we were like her really close family. She never married, and she was an educator and an artist, and lived to be 95 years old. So she, as well as my godmother, so I always looked up to her. Very strong woman, traveled, with education, had her PhD in philosophy, and she was an educator at the UW Milwaukee. She went to the university here to get her PhD, and later on, after she retired, she went back to the University of Minnesota, I think Minneapolis, and she earned, within 10 years, her Bachelor of Fine Arts, Studio Arts. So so I am lucky to be doing artwork these days, and I think she was my role model, and I can just see those blue eyes and the white hair, and she had Alzheimer's, but I think she remembered a lot of us to the very end, and her spirit is within all of us. And she had an art show here. I think we had 2 people help her frame and put up her real. She did art throughout her dementia and into the Alzheimer's until she couldn't. And but she was a very, she was spiritual, and she did miniature spiritual abstracts and gave God the glory through her artwork. And being abstract, people would see figures and suggest titles from Bible verses, and that's how she wanted to share her faith. And David Lund is her brother. He's over here, and this is my sister Michelle, another niece. So.
I count Grace Lund a friend. Gail and I used to visit her over in the 3rd floor. 2nd floor? I remember seeing a short film of her speaking to a group about what it was like to know she had Alzheimer's and what was going to happen in the future. And she had a beautiful art show in a local church, and she had pictures of that up in her room. Great flaming pictures, wonderful. And as she lost some of her abilities, she got a different kind of art, and we put that up in the Seasons Gallery one time. Was that 2 years ago? And once in a while, she would come down to the terraces for Saturday social. And Gail and or I or both would go and visit her in her very small room. And she had a wonderful spirit. And one more thing, we took her, or we accompanied her on a bus trip out to the gallery, which sells her pictures, and had a meal out there. And I wrote a very little article about that in one of the center posts.
I think she was the sweetest lady I have ever met. She constantly had a smile. And at the end, when she could no longer remember who I was, she always smiled at me as though she recognized me. She was great. As well as Alice Kroenke. I put those two in the same category.
We remember Grace. Robert Bob Schwartz, Terrace's resident. Steve?
Thank you. I'm Steve Schwartz. Oh, actually, okay, sorry. I'm Steve Schwartz. I'm Bob's son, and I've been down here quite a bit in the last 5 years. When Dad was a resident here, he was at the Terraces. He moved here in 2012 upon the sudden death of my mom and his wife, Sandy. He was an amazing guy. My parents always believed in short recollections, short remembrances, so I'll make this brief. Many of you knew my dad. I think he always had a smile on his face. He always had a good word to say about somebody. That's how I like to remember my dad. He was an awesome musician. He was a great pharmacist. He was a great teacher in the School of Pharmacy, which a lot of people didn't know. And he was an avid black and white photographer, which was a really good medium for him. So we have a lot of good memories in the last 5 years. He had a lot of good years here. Probably 3 of the 5 years were really good years for him here, mobility-wise and activity-wise. And that's what we like to remember. Thank you.
I remember Bob as a pharmacist and a musician, and his band played for our daughter's wedding, so I have a little spot in my heart for him. It was really sad watching him here and not being able to communicate with him because he talked so soft, and I couldn't really understand him. So I asked one of the nurses, how do you communicate? And she said, I just put on music for him, and that was our way of communicating.
We go back 80 years. 80 years. We were buddies for a long, long time. And his father was famous Schwartz's Pharmacy. Anybody remember that? No, it's just like Cheers, because we all know each other and we were happy. There's one story I'd like to tell about you. One time my dog ate ate her pill and birth control pill. So she called Bobby and said, what's going to happen to my dog? And the answer was, he been talking loud bark. And we were buddies for a long time, and I'm sure we'll miss him at Silver Schwartz's Pharmacy.
No. Good memories of a very nice man.
we were actually family from way back when on high holidays we had a party, and Bobby used to blow his trumpet loudly, and it was fun.
Gail? Yeah.
We would bring Bob over for, when he was able, we would bring him over for programs in the evening, and it was such fun when we had musicians. There wasn't one that didn't know him.
Well, it's true about Bob. He gave forth humor and music, and he was a healer of people through his medications, but also through his love and his humor. He also blew the shofar for the Jewish New Year here, and he was a teacher, not just a pharmacy. I think the thing that he taught us best was about love, and especially about family, and how to love family, and they in turn, how to love in return. The devotion of him to his wonderful wife Sandy, the devotion of his sons to him and him to them, it stands as a lesson for all of us, as a model for all of us. And it was a privilege and a blessing to know Bob and to continue to know the family. So thank you for sharing him with us.
I remember Bob when I first came to the terraces. For all of you who know me, I'm Patrick. I'm the assisted living director. And so when people come to the terraces, they often need some help with some things. And so it can be challenging to watch people as they decline. But Bob was always somebody who made an impression on me. He always had a great sense of humor and could always make me smile. Anytime I was down, I would go upstairs, I would see Bob, and he always had some sort of joke. And it would just put a smile on my face, and I loved that. And Bob knew how to love others, just like his children loved him. Steve and his sons were there very often, and it's always great to see people visiting. One last thing that I remember about him is how he made impression on somebody here, where he was able to walk somebody down the aisle for their wedding. And I mean, just to make that impression on somebody speaks a lot. So that's how I remember Bob.
Thank you, Patrick. There's a request from family also to remember Sandy Schwartz as well today. So we remember Bob and Sandy. We remember next Tom Burns, a Heights resident, and the family is here.
Hi, my name's Bridget. Tom was my father, and I'll tell you, I have nothing planned. Those of you that know him knew him as the person that had the person with the gift of gab, and always a sense of humor. And I'm looking at some people like Alice over there, and he was always asking what kind of trouble she's getting into today. And I'm trying to think what else. Politics was his life the last few years, and I'm thinking, oh my God, he kept betting whether or not Trump was going to get impeached. And I'm just thinking, I would still not sure what's out with that jury. Anyway, happy to see people from Nautilus Drive, all of his friends here, and he was a great guy, as you know, and we'll miss him.
Hi, I'm Rob. I'm one of Tom's nephews. And from my earliest memories of visiting, he would make me laugh. just like Bridget was saying. It's like I was at the best comedy club ever, even if it was an audience of one. And I understand as recently as when he was in healthcare or rehab for a recent illness, he didn't want to leave because he had a whole new audience. He seemed unflappable. Nothing seemed to bother him from my perspective, and I was always happy in his presence. Before they moved to Capitol Lakes, I was at Ruth and Tom's house. In the winter, Tom was chronically cold, so he would just sit like this. And one of my favorite memories was he said, "Rob, I don't know where I'm going to go when I die, but I hope it's someplace hot."
Alice, and then
This was one funny man. Here's an example of his sense of humor. He got on the van that takes us grocery shopping, and the driver looked at him, holy moly. He looked like he'd been hit by a big truck. One arm was in a sling and the other was in a pocket, and he had a navy blue chunk on his cheekbone. And the driver looked at him and he said, "What happened?" And Tom said, "The chute didn't open."
I was a neighbor of Tom's. I grew up as a small child. We moved into our home when I was 5, and we got to be fast friends with Bridget, and millions of games and fun back then. And when I started taking piano lessons, Tom invited me in. I must have been about 7, and he asked me to play him a song on his piano. And I played it, and he acted like I was the star of USA. It was unbelievable, and to this day I still play music, and I think a lot of it had to do with him. The other thing he told me was to call him Sidney, because he said he was Sidney Poitier. And so when I saw my first movie with Sidney Poitier, I was very confused for a long time. But recently, I was in Ireland, and knowing Burns, one of the favorite things that I heard over there was when you would leave someone at night or after just meeting someone, they'd always look at you and say, "Safe home." So safe home, Tom.
I think I will always remember the 4th of July picnics and get-togethers, but you can't think of Tom without the piano. You just can't. And one of the most favorite memories I will always have is when we threw my mother a surprise birthday party in 2007, and the end of the night was Tom at the piano, singing so many show tones, or not singing, but playing, maybe singing, but definitely playing. Maybe it was Mom that was singing. And it was just wonderful. So there will always be those special memories. He was a great man, and he always had a joke and a twinkle in his eye. And you couldn't leave him in a bad mood. He wouldn't let you leave in a bad mood.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes. I knew Tom in a very strange way. We both went to the university's exercise area, and I didn't really ever see him there, but I heard him down in the men's changing room, and I heard this very gravelly voice. And I thought he must be in the agricultural school. He sounded very much like some farmers I knew. And so that's all I knew of him. I found this, I would go down and I would find his, hear his voice, and then I came here and I heard the same voice. It was fantastic. And a lot of fun.
We remember Tom. Next is Ruth Bossert, Main Gate resident. before we share about Ruth? Okay.
A lovely woman and a beautiful artist, very artistic. And she had a sweet nature, and if you went over to her apartment, you sat down and you didn't want to leave for a half hour.
She's already said it. And I think Alice had, Ruth was just a very sweet, fun, nice person to be with and to spend some time with, and I'll miss her. She's one of the, first people that I met, and one by one they're disappearing.
When I moved here, Ruth Bossert was my neighbor across the hall. So we got acquainted, and my husband was in agriculture. Her husband was in agriculture. I was living in Illinois. She was from Illinois. So we had some things to get acquainted about. I miss her.
Somehow Ruth found out that my husband Jim was a geologist, and every time we had an opportunity to see Ruth, she would talk about her stones, which of course are rocks and so on. And 2 or 3 or 4 times during the happy hour, she would bring her cache of rocks and ask for them to be identified. And I'm just curious as to how she got this interest, and yet she knew when Jim would tell her what something was, she would accept it and go on from there. So we had a relationship based on stones.
Just the invitation from the family tomorrow, July 7th, there will be in the afternoon a service of remembrance. So family invited all of you to come and join tomorrow. We remember Ruth. Harry Tobias, Heights resident.
Harry died about a month after our 68th anniversary of our wedding. And we often talked about how lucky we were to be together so long. And see your kids grow.
Well, I'm Amy Fields. I'm Harry and Marge's daughter. And we actually, in our house, we call 68 years an eternity because it sounds like a really long time. But a blessed long time. My dad was hysterically funny. And even as his world closed in around him, he was still funny. But the story I'm going to tell you happened the day he died. My sister and I were here. This was before he died, and so we quick ran an errand, and then my sister wanted a cup of coffee, so we stopped at EVP Coffee. And my sister got her coffee. I'm still trying to figure out what I want. She takes her wallet out of her purse, and our son called and said that Papa had passed away. I turned to my sister. We're still at the counter at EVP, and I said, "That was Randy. Dad just died." We both simultaneously, of course, burst into tears. And my sister then has the presence of mind to start to pay for the coffee so we could come back here. And the woman at the counter says, "Well, I'm not going to make you pay for that coffee." She heard the whole conversation. At which point, I burst out laughing because I thought, what a ruse to get a free cup of coffee. Dad would have thought that was hilarious.
So, my grandfather, when they moved here, it was a great thing for them because my grandfather loved to play cards, and he had new people to play with and new people to beat. I would often walk in and see him playing cards, and he never remembered if he was winning or losing, but didn't matter to him. But everybody around him said, yeah, he's winning. And he was always very, very happy. And, you know, for us grandkids, that's all we want from our grandparents is love and happiness. And so we were all very lucky.
Well, despite Amy's loving story about the free cup of coffee, I have to say that I think maybe Harry might have, on the one hand, thought it was very funny because he had a great sense of humor, but I think he might have been a little ambivalent because those of us who knew Harry knew he was the most generous man that you could ever meet. He supported so many philanthropies. He cared so much about the people of the world, all over the world. He cared so much about the Madison community. His generosity was almost to a fault, except it wasn't a fault. It was the goodness in him. I see Harry as a pillar not just trying to help hold up the world, but a pillar first to his family, who, as you can see, adores him, but also to the community which he helped build. And it's truly a model for us all.
We remember Harry. We'll remember Lois Lane, Heights and assisted living resident.
I mean, no one could resist when I first met her. I mean, I tried to resist. Lois Lane, really? You know? and she took everything, those comments very good-naturedly, and she was a lovely woman. But the moment I will remember most, I'm trying to remember which birthday it was it her 90th? When Terry Little came dressed as Superman and jumped onto her lap. And she was so good, you know, she really enjoyed it, and it was just wonderful.
Yeah, it was her 100th birthday. Lois Lane was for a while our oldest resident in our community, and we all enjoyed her wisdom and her good spirit. Last couple of years, she spent at the assisted living, and still some of our staff that took care of her enjoyed her immensely. We remember Lois. Robert Bob Winkley, Heights and assisted living resident.
I'm Jim Winkle, Bob Winkle's son. My dad came here about a little over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. He had a bad fall while shoveling snow in his house of 60 years in Wauwatosa, which he did not want to leave. We'd been working on him for probably 10 years. You know, come move to Madison, we can help you with stuff. But he loved to shovel snow, and he loved to mow the grass. And his neighbors called me when his driveway was not shoveled, because they're like, you know, I know he's 90, but he's always the first one to have his driveway shoveled. So he had fallen, crawled back in the house, and laid there for 4 days and survived. So he was one tough cookie. So that was his third fall in 3 years. So I had many conversations with him and finally got him to come to Madison. And I knew it would be good for him here because he's very shy, but he loved people. He just loved people, and met so many people here. And he would always tell me, you know, everybody knows my name, but I don't know their name, because he had Alzheimer's. But he had a really high quality of life here and really enjoyed the people and really enjoyed the music in this room in the evenings.
Thank you. Yeah. Mary and
I think I'm not the only one who would find Bob Wakel kind of wandering around when he first came here. And I found out what his room was. And I said, well, I'll take you back to your apartment. And he went back to his apartment. But he found the way to the programs, and he never missed an evening program here. He'd come in late, because he probably was kind of late finishing his dinner, but he came in late and he enjoyed it. And I think he played a musical instrument, he told me, but I forget what it was, the oboe or something. But loved the music here.
Hi, I was a neighbor of Bob's at the other end of our third floor, but I got to know him because this other person besides me would come every Sunday night to listen to the men's chorus. And I've got to chat with him a little bit at that time. And he said, I love men's voices. He didn't just like ordinary choruses or ordinary music, but it was men's voices. And the other thing was sharing with him, as the comment was, the visiting musicians. And one night, this seemed to me more than once, but for sure one night, the jazz musician entertaining us played the saxophone. And every time he played something, Bob was saying the words. And so the performer kept gravitating over toward Bob, who sat in the front row and whose head was right under his nose. And so what did the performer end up doing? He turned sideways so he could do the saxophone thing, and right in front of Bob. And he turned sideways and leaned back and played just for Bob.
We remember Bob. Catherine Hoyt is a Heights resident.
I'm Marika Fisher-Hoyt, her daughter-in-law, and this is her husband, Bill, and these are her grandchildren and friend. I've known Kathy all my life because we came from the same hometown. My earliest remembrance of her was when I was in middle school. We played, our high school didn't have an orchestra, so those of us who were orchestral musicians went across the river to Douglas College and played in a community orchestra there. So she did it, and I did it, and other people did it. And my husband's brother, Tim, had been teasing me on the playground that day. And I complained to Kathy. I said, Kathy, Tim called me scrawny. And she looked at me and she said, well, you are. So I know I'd had conversations with her before that, but that's the first one I remember. She was a wonderful friend then. I didn't know her that well, but then after I married into the family, I knew her really well. She was the opposite of any horror story you hear about mothers-in-law. She was the most loving, welcoming, supportive mother-in-law you could ever imagine, and she loved music as much as I did, and her favorite composer was Bach, just like mine. So we had a lot in common. It was fabulous. She loved the family. She loved her granddaughters. About 15 years ago, they decided they were going to leave New Jersey, which is where we were all from, and they came here to watch their granddaughters grow up. It was lovely having them part of the family. She was, among many of her skills was sewing and quilting, and she made them quilts when they were each born, so Mara's is pretty much in shreds and tatters. So when Kathy saw that, she said, well, I'll make her another one. So when Mara went off to college, she got another one, and before she died, I don't know how she did it. I mean, she could hardly walk, but she had Bill get out the sewing machine, and she made one more quilt for Mina. So that was her. She just liked to give to people. So we very much miss her.
we got to know Kathy and Bill as neighbors down the hall. Kathy was by training and education an audiologist, and as her daughter-in-law said, music was her great love, and she not only through her professional skills of audiology when she was responsible for audiology at a major hospital in New Jersey, but she also was able to open the ears of many people to music, and in very wonderful ways. We would sometimes have dinner with Bill and Kathy, and Kathy really wanted to have dinner with us because we were quite willing to say things political that some others weren't. And she was very upset with the last election for president and wondered, whatever could be done and whatever would happen to the world. And so now we're finding out.
We remember Kathy. Vaughn Cameron, Main Gate, an assisted living resident.
I'm Vaughn's daughter, and it is way too early to try to summarize somebody so complex, or the complex relationship that exists between every mother and daughter. But I do want to thank all of the residents here who welcomed her as a shy person, who befriended her, and who enriched these last 5 years of her life at Capitol Lakes.
Thank you. There is also invitation from family for the service of remembrance on July 22nd, 2 p.m. So you're all invited to join the family for the service here. Helen Buick, Heights resident.
Hello, I'm Gail O'Donnell, and I'm Helen Buick's niece. This is her nephew, and this is her great-niece. I was not expecting to speak today, but we're here. As you may or may not know, Helen passed away just a few days ago, July 1st, and so we're here taking care of her business. Growing up, we never really knew Helen too well because if you know anything about Helen, she was with the American Red Cross, and she traveled with the Army. And so she was either in some state here, not necessarily Wisconsin, or she was abroad. And I know that she did ask to, during the Vietnam War, she asked to go over to Vietnam. And so that's where she went. When she was stationed, when she was with the American Red Cross in England, she was there for several years. When she was leaving, she said she was going to go to Russia because she would never be that close to Russia again. So I really didn't know my aunt very well, but I invited myself to go with her. And she agreed. She was glad for the companionship, and so we were over there for 15 days together, and that's probably the most time that any of us kids ever spent with her at one time. She loved Capitol Lakes. It was Mariner Heights when she came. She's probably one of the older people that were here. She lived here for 15 years. And this place she never wanted to leave. She told us, don't ever take me out of Madison. I don't care what you do. I'm staying here. So here's where she stayed. And I'll just end up with a funny note, is when she was 90, she said, I'm going to buy another new car. And then she said, I suppose it's the last new car I'll ever have. And she passed away at 95.
I got to know Helen mostly because she was good friends with Edith Harb, and they had dinner together all the time. And so that's how I got to know. And her story, talking with her. And I also knew that she was an avid, was it bridge that she played? And she seemed to be the one responsible for buying the new deck of cards. And I had to ask her one time, where do you buy a deck of cards? So I knew who to go to. So that's how I got to know her story from her.
People used to tease her about her name. You must know that. What was the type of car that she bought? Was it a Buick? No, I loved talking to her. She was just great. I had to put that in because that was a running joke.
Thank you. Paul?
Just one other little story. We saw her just a few days before she died, and it was our job to deliver a little cash because she needed cash for her wine. She liked a glass of wine in the evening, and so we had to deliver that to her. And she was very grateful, I tell you that.
Thank you. Well, we remember Helen. Just a brief invitation again. Burial service for Helen will be on Saturday, July 8th, 1 p.m. in Windsor. That's where the family plots are. And so if any of you feel taking a field trip and visiting with the family at the cemetery in Windsor, you're all invited. Yeah. Well, next we have Florence sharing with us.
Hi. The mourner's cottage is a prayer of affirmation of one's faith, recognizing a time of sadness, loss, memories, and mourning, while also realizing that life goes on. The prayer dates back to the Middle Ages and is written in the vernacular of the Jewish people in Palestine at the time. Before I say it, well, maybe I'll end with the other piece. There's one thing I want to add that I don't usually add. I'll say the Kaddish first. Yit gadal v'yit gadash me rabah v'yama divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayachon uv'yomachon uv'chayei d'cho Beit Yisrael ba'agola avazman kariv v'yemru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mavorach le'olam olmei olmaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitmaraman v'yitnaseh V'yet hada, v'yet halev, v'yet halal, shmei d'kucha b'richu, li'elam en kol b'chata, v'shirota, tush b'chata, v'nechamata, da'amiram be'amo, v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu yasei shalom aleinu, V'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. This year, I'm adding something that I've had for a while. It comes from, it's the translation of something in the prayer book that when we read the Kaddish, that part of the service, and this is the translation. There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light, long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember.
Some of you are very familiar with us, and those of you who are not, I'm going to take a moment to share who we are. We're the Threshold Singers of Madison, and we are a chapter of the International Threshold Choir. Our group in Madison has 24 women, and we sing healing and comforting songs to seriously ill, dying, and grieving individuals. And we do this at bedside, and we come in a group of 3 or 4 singers. And we come into people's homes, we go to hospitals, we go to hospice care centers and facilities such as Capitol Lakes. And on a weekly basis, we do sing here at Capitol Lakes. We sing in the health center on 3rd floor. And we also this year started to sing in the assisted living and memory care unit also. So in doing that, many of the names mentioned here today are in our hearts also. And so we share many memories that we get additional memories from coming and hearing all of you share about your family members. So we are going to sing our last song. It's In the End. And we will first sing it to you. And then when we are done, I will include you. And then you can sing it with us. So the lyrics are written in your program. So we will hear us as we sing In the End.
As we're closing our service, thank you all again for coming. There's refreshments in the next door room, so you're welcome to stay after the service. And I thank you all participants and all the family members and community members. And I just want to remind all of us how our life is short and precious, and how we do not have too much time to gladden the hearts of those who traveled the way with us. So be swift to be loving, and may haste to be kind, and may the blessing of the one who made us, loves us, and journeys with us be upon us and our loved ones forevermore. Amen. We'll still hear Gene Alderman, and Mary France playing postlude.